The wheel, right? It's like the symbol of a great idea, a total game changer. But what if I told you that classic story we all know, the one with the lone genius having a sudden eureka moment, is completely, totally wrong?
Yeah, we all picture it, don't we? Some ancient guy, maybe a caveman, sees a log rolling down a hill and bam, the wheel is invented. Just like that. It's a great story, super simple, super powerful. The only problem? It's pretty much a myth.
So the real origin of the wheel has been this massive historical cold case. For years, experts were stumped. They had no idea where, how, or even who invented it. But now, thanks to some really cool new research, we're finally starting to piece together the real story. And trust me, it's way stranger and more interesting than the myth. We're not talking about a sudden flash of genius, but a really, really slow evolution.
Okay, so let's get into it. How exactly do you solve a mystery that's 6,000 years old? Well, you've got to follow the clues. And right now, researchers are focusing on 3 major pieces of evidence that are totally changing our understanding of where the wheel came from.
Think of it like a high-tech detective show. First, you have the physical evidence, actual artifacts, things like old clay models, and even the oldest wheels ever found. Then you've got the crime scene, a super specific and kind of strange place where the wheel pretty much had to be invented. And the final piece? Our secret weapon. These incredible new computer tools that basically let us rewind history and see how it all could have happened. Now, this timeline is where things get really wild. Check out the date on the far left, 4500 BC. That's the potter's wheel. This tells us that people understood the concept of high-speed rotation for a full millennium before anyone ever thought to put a wheel on a cart. 1,000 years. The idea was there, but it had absolutely nothing to do with getting from point A to point B.
And this is that high-tech tool I mentioned. It's called computational structural analysis. Basically, scientists created these super detailed computer simulations. They told the computer, here are the laws of physics, here are the materials they had 6,000 years ago, now figure out the absolute best way to move a really heavy thing. And the computer ran thousands of scenarios, and the results, well, they were mind-blowing. They all pointed to one single, very specific way the wheel had to have evolved.
So what does all this mean? The big takeaway here is that we have to throw out the idea of a single aha moment. All the evidence points to this long, slow process of trial and error. We're talking about something that took 500 years. It really wasn't an invention in the way we think of it. It was more like an evolution. And it all started in a place you would never, ever expect. So forget everything you picture about rolling hills and open fields. The new theory says the wheel was born deep underground. We're talking about the tight, hot, and dark tunnels of ancient copper mines in the Carpathian Mountains. The miners down there had a huge problem. How do you get tons and tons of super heavy ore out of these tiny little tunnels? And it was that very specific problem that forced them to innovate, leading to one of the biggest breakthroughs in human history.
And this right here shows you exactly how it probably happened. It's brilliant. Look at step 1. It starts with just basic log rollers. But the problem in a narrow tunnel is that the cart would slip off sideways. So what do? You start carving grooves into the rollers to keep it stable. Now, over time, we're talking generations here. Those grooves just get deeper and deeper until, bam, you get to step 2. What's left is basically a single piece, a thin axle in the middle with wide discs on the end. The first wheel and axle. It wasn't one big idea. It was just a bunch of small, smart fixes that added up over time until you get to the final design. And I gotta stress this did not happen overnight. The computer simulations suggest this whole process, from a simple log roller to a real functional wheel set, took about 500 years. 500 years. That's something like 20 generations of miners, with each generation making their own tiny little tweaks and improvements, all of which eventually built up into this incredible new technology.
Okay, but here's where the story completely flips. After 500 years of this super slow, gradual development, once the design is finally perfected, it just explodes. That 500-year crawl turns into an absolute sprint across the globe. And this is the big paradox at the heart of the story. How can something take 500 years to invent in one tiny, isolated place? And then, once it's out, it spreads across thousands of miles, from the North Sea all the way to the Middle East, in just 100 years. I mean, that's insanely fast for the ancient world. What happened? Well, it turns out an invention like the wheel can't just exist on its own. It needs what you could call a technological ecosystem to actually work. Think about it. You need strong animals, like oxen, that are already domesticated to pull these new heavy wagons. You need good metal tools, in this case copper alloys, to carve the wood precisely enough for the hubs and axles. And maybe most importantly, you need a reason to use it, like a growing economy where you have to transport lots of grain or goods. All those things were already there, just waiting for the wheel to show up. This is so cool. We can actually see this spread happening in language itself. Linguists have found that the word for wheel in tons of different languages can be traced back to one single ancient word, kweklos. It means something like the thing that turns and turns. And the fact that we find versions of this word everywhere from India to Ireland is like linguistic DNA. It proves the idea of the wheel, and the word for it spread like wildfire from a single source. But okay, that fast spread brings up one last really important question. If the wheel was such a game changer and it spread so quickly across Europe and Asia, why didn't it take over the whole world? Why didn't everyone adopt it? This, to me, is the craziest part of the whole story. You have these incredibly advanced civilizations like the Maya and the Aztecs and the Americas who absolutely knew what a wheel was, but they just chose not to use it for transport. And even weirder, in places like the Middle East, they used it for a while and then just stopped. They abandoned it. What on earth was going on? This chart breaks it all down, and it goes right back to that ecosystem idea. In Eurasia, you had all the right ingredients: oxen, big open plains, and eventually roads. So yeah, the wagon was a huge success. But now look at the Americas. No big animals to pull a cart, and the terrain was all mountains and dense jungle. A wheeled cart would have been useless. And in the Middle East? Well, after the Roman Empire collapsed and their amazing roads crumbled, the camel just became a much better, more efficient option for crossing the desert. So the wheel wasn't this inevitable force of progress. It just had to be the right tool for the right job. And in a lot of places, it wasn't. And here's the absolute proof. Archaeologists have literally found little wheeled toys in ancient American sites. So the Maya, the Aztecs, they got the concept. They knew how a wheel and axle worked. It's not that they weren't smart enough. It's that they were smart enough to realize it was a bad investment for them. They made a completely logical choice not to use it for transport because the rest of that ecosystem just wasn't there. And that leaves us with a pretty powerful idea to chew on. The story of the wheel proves that no technology, no matter how brilliant it seems, is inevitable. Its success is always tied to a whole hidden network of other factors: the environment, the economy, other technologies. Which really makes you think, doesn't it? What about today? Which of our supposedly inevitable technologies would completely fall apart if just one piece of their own hidden ecosystem suddenly vanished?